Welcome, everyone, to the Girlfriend Book Club's monthly discussion. I'm Shelley Emling, the executive editor of the Girlfriend newsletter. I'm also the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club. And this month, April, the 80,000 members of the Girlfriend Book Club chose The Frozen River as our pick. And I could not be more thrilled that you did, because this was so riveting. I mean, Martha Ballard is one of the greatest characters I think I've ever read about in a book. It just it was engrossing. It was everything. It was so good. And so we're so fortunate tonight to welcome the author, Ariel Lawhon, this evening. Ariel, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here.
So first off, I know how you came up with this idea for the book because I read it somewhere, but can you tell everybody, because I know all of our members are asking, how did you ever come up with this premise for this amazing book?
Yes, of course. So the novel is about a woman named Martha Ballard. She was a midwife in the late 1700s. And to be honest with you, I had never heard of her and would have never likely heard of her had I not been pregnant with my fourth son. My husband and I have four boys. I had all four of them in 5 years.
You did, yeah.
I was pregnant with the fourth. This would have been August of 2008, and I was at my doctor's office. And my doctor had gotten stuck at the hospital with a really tricky delivery. So I had been stranded in his waiting room. And I brought a book with me, which I finished. It was Stardust by Neil Gaiman, actually. And then I proceeded to read all of the magazines in the waiting room. And I really had two choices. I could reschedule and go home, but there were children waiting for me.
Yeah.
And my husband had them and everyone was fine. Or I could stick it out and wait. And that's what I chose to do. So I finished the book. I read all the magazines. I don't think it's me. And there was nothing left to read but a stack of really scary. Is that my microphone? Sorry. I was getting some weird feedback. I wasn't sure if it was me.
Yeah.
And underneath this pile of scary pamphlets was a small devotional. It was called Our Daily Bread. So I flipped it open to that day, and it told the story of a woman named Martha Ballard, who was a midwife, and she delivered over 1,000 babies in the course of her career, and she never lost a mother in childbirth. And I remember thinking that would make an incredible novel. So I ripped the page out and I put it in my purse and I took it home. And I have to pause here and say it was not like a very fancy leather-bound devotional. This was disposable. They're meant to be thrown away. I took it home and I promptly learned two other really fascinating things about Martha Ballard. The first of which is that she kept a diary for 30 years at a time when women usually could not read or write.
How did you find that
out? The diary or
the diary? She had a diary.
I went home and I Googled her and I found out that she'd written this diary, kept this diary, and that a handful of copies existed. And then I also found out that this woman was the great aunt of Clara Barton, founder of the American Red Cross. And she was the great great grandmother of Mary Hobart, who was one of the first female physicians in the United States. And the reason that her diary exists to this day is those women in her family passed it down woman to woman to woman until it finally ended up at the Maine State Library. Somebody transcribed it, printed copies, which I later bought a copy of. So that is how I found Martha Ballard. And to be honest with you, I did not write her story immediately. I held on to it for a number of years. And
really?
I read it. Yeah, I wrote it during the pandemic. I wrote 5 other novels before this one.
Really?
Yeah.
Because you wanted to give yourself ample time to do the research, or what?
I think if you'd asked me at the time, I would have said, oh, it's a really big book. It's going to take a lot of research. I'm not ready. I think in hindsight, the reality is that this novel is about a mature woman. Martha Ballard is 55 years old when this story opens. She's been married for 35 years. She's given birth to 9 children, only 6 of whom are still living.
Right.
I think in hindsight, this novel as it exists today could not have been written by that girl in the doctor's waiting room. I had to grow up myself. I am now in the stage of life where Martha Ballard is in this story. My children are growing up. I've got 2 in college, 2 in high school. The primary work I've done all of these years is kind of winding down. I relate to her in ways I could have never related to her as a younger woman. I've been married for 23 years, so not quite as long as her. But I've seen some stuff in
Yeah.
similar ways that Martha has seen some stuff in this novel. And it really taught me that sometimes you can find the best idea, but it's not the best idea for right now. That
Right.
there are seasons in
So
which,
you held on to it then. You held on
yeah,
to it. You knew
I have somewhere in my office
exactly.
here, I have this scrap of paper that I ripped out of that devotional. I kept it. I still have it.
Wow. So I know you've written many books. I mean, is that how it usually comes to you? Something random that you spot, like sitting in a doctor's office reading a magazine? Is that typically how you come
Every
up with ideas?
Yep, every single time. With every one of my novels, I used to say that I found these ideas. In hindsight, I think they find me, but I have
Right.
been minding my own business, going about my life, and a great novel idea will fall out of a clear blue sky. And
Yeah.
every single time I will see this idea and all the little hairs will stand up on the back of my neck and I go, oh,
That's it.
that'd make a great novel.
Yeah. Because can you imagine if you hadn't been in that doctor's office that day, you wouldn't know about this Martha Ballard at
I mean,
all.
if he had been on time,
Right.
it would have never happened.
Right.
Or if I'd rescheduled and gone home, it would have never happened. I mean, it was just such a strange confluence of events
Yeah.
where the story found me. And I kid you not, he walked in 2 minutes after I read that devotional.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was your research process like for this? Because even the language of the time, I'm sure you had to research and investigate because of the different way
Oh,
the
yeah.
different wording of the late 1700s. I mean, I can't
So
even imagine.
everything else I've written has taken place in the early 20th century. So between like 1917 and 1945. So there was electricity, there were automobiles, a lot of the modern technology that we enjoy existed. This is different. Obviously, I had to go back several hundred years. And what that requires is recreating a time that doesn't exist anymore.
Mm,
I had to learn about candle making. I had to learn about all kinds of just the minutia. How do you bake? How do you cook when you don't have a gas oven? All of these small things, but you
no, it was
can't.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. The trick, though, for me, if I want you to be swept away in a story, I cannot bog you down in that minutia. I
Right.
have to give just enough brushstrokes to where you feel it. You feel that she's wearing different kinds of clothing, but
Right.
maintain the focus on the story. The language, though, was probably one of the harder bits
I
because
would imagine. Yes.
this takes place 50 years post Puritan era. There are no these and thous. They're not speaking in really archaic language.
Yeah.
But there is a brevity of the language that needs to feel just slightly different than how we speak today. And that comes over time. I have to hear the voice, I have to find it. And then over the course of writing the novel, that voice tends to stay in my head and it's easy to reproduce over the course of months or years or however long it takes.
So how did you, you know, educate yourself on the language at that time? I mean, did you read books from that period or were you, I mean, how did you do that?
Mainly in terms of figuring out the brevity of the language, it was from Martha's diary itself.
Okay.
I've got a copy of it right there on my shelf, along with my other research book. One thing that came in really handy is a biography of Martha Ballard written by a woman named Laurel Thatcher Ulrich. It's called A Midwife's Tale. And it is the definitive biography of Martha Ballard.
Mm.
Laurel Thatcher Ulrich is a professor at Harvard. She's a historian. She actually won the Pulitzer in 1992 for that book. It is
Wow.
incredible. So if you need more Martha Ballard in your life, definitely grab a
I
copy of
didn't read
that.
that. She won the Pulitzer for that biography?
She
I didn't
did.
know that. Okay.
Yes, she did. And I'm
Wow.
looking at my shelf here now. So I've got North American Wildlife. I've got an entire book on taverns and drinking in early America, which you can learn all kinds of stuff about behavior in that one. Lots of books about nature study. I've got an entire book on botanical Shakespeare, all of the
Yeah,
plants
amazing.
mentioned in Shakespeare.
Yeah.
So I find this, well, first I figure out what kind of story I want to tell, how I want it to feel. And then I
Mhm.
find as much research material as will help me build that story.
So it took place over how many months? Not that many months.
The story takes place over 6 months, one long, cold winter in Hallowell, Maine. It begins when the river freezes solid. I did not know this. The Kennebec River can freeze solid. It begins when the river freezes solid, and it ends 6 months later when the river opens at the spring thaw.
Is that the way you planned it from the get-go? You knew you were going to do the 6 months like that?
Yeah, sort of a mercenary decision, right? I'm writing this story. I kind of want you to be trapped into the story. I want you to be so transfixed that you feel trapped right there with it and you're in it to the end. And it seemed helpful to trap all the townspeople in this town as well. They can't leave. The river itself was the primary means of transportation up and down the river with boats. They're locked in for the winter. It's snowing. And of course, there's a murder and there's a trial going on, which means that all of these people that live and work together are suddenly at each other's throats. There's tension and there's this sense of doom in the air and a kind of a claustrophobia, which those are just the small parts of my job to include and to kind of build this story from the ground up.
So was there a character or a scene or a chapter that was really particularly challenging to write over the others?
The most challenging thing for me in this entire novel was at the heart of this story is a rape trial that really happened. There was a woman named Rebecca Foster, and she was raped by several of the men in her town, and that rape went to trial. Martha Ballard was not only the woman who delivered the child born of that rape, she was the main witness in the trial, and her diary itself became the bedrock in the trial and also in the novel itself. And it's a really hard subject, and I never want that subject to feel like entertainment. But I also wanted to tell the truth. This really happened to this woman. And so to me, that was the trickiest part of the whole story. It felt like doing a tightrope walk on the edge of a razor blade. I wanted you to feel it. But I didn't ever want it to become a throwaway part of the story or entertainment, because it's not. It really happened. It really matters to the story. And I felt like getting that right was the most important thing I did.
Yeah, I think a lot of the Girlfriend Book Club members have asked or wanted me to ask you how much of this book was actually real.
I would say 75% of what happens in this novel really happened. There are obviously bits that I had to put in. I mean, there are conversations that we don't know. A lot of the stuff is not recorded, and there are only 2 documents that I could really look at for Martha Ballard's life. The first is her diary, which is the primary source document. And then the second is the biography about her. And so Martha's diary is this up close, personal, intimate look at her day-to-day life. And then the biography is this 30,000-foot view of the life and times of a woman living in post-Puritan America.
So did you quote pretty accurately from the diary when you were?
Yes. Yeah, there were a few times I moved to diary entries around. There were a number of times that I would condense them, like if they went on for a while and the story didn't need that information. I can count on one hand the number of entries that are fictional that I needed just to fill gaps in the story. But that is Martha's diary. It's her voice. It's her words. I would fix spelling. She was not super big on spelling consistency. But other than
she
that,
gets hard to read at an older age, right?
Other than that, you're reading the words of this woman who really lived.
I was always just glad when Ephraim, the husband, came back.
We love Ephraim.
Yeah, I loved him so much. So what's your day-to-day writing process like? I mean, the members always want to know, do you get up at 8 and work from 9 to 5 writing, or do you work on how do you do your when you're writing a book? What's your schedule like?
So now that my boys are older, they are 20, 19, 16, and 15. Now it's so much easier. There were a lot of years that I was writing before dawn or until midnight or nights and weekends. You do what you have to do when you have small children. And I have nothing but respect for all the moms out there, scraping time together. I had to do it myself. These days it's actually really nice. Everyone's in school. I typically write 10 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. I find those to be the hours that my mind is most focused.
Yeah.
But I mean, every time I get on deadline, I'm at this desk. I mean, you're looking at my office here. This is my bookshelf back there. I'm at this desk for 16 plus hours a day trying to get it done. And so there's the season of the book where I keep civilized hours. And
Yeah.
then there's the season of the book where I haven't showered in
Really,
3 days. I don't know what I'm eating. I don't know where the children are. Everyone's afraid to come in my office. The
hopefully
men
everybody's
in
okay.
my house just grunt at me. Yeah.
So I'm curious, does your husband read the book? Like as you're doing the chapters, does anybody give you feedback as you're doing it, or you just write it and then
He
throw it out?
never reads them. He never reads them while I'm writing it. I keep everything locked down. My agent and my editor have to pry these books out of my cold, dead hands. I would never turn them in. Like I always say that books are never done, they're only due.
Right,
So
exactly.
eventually I have to let them go, but I really don't let anybody see them when I'm working on them. Although now that the book is out and published, my husband is reading it. He likes to listen to the audio as he's reading it. And so he's not a super fast reader. He'll read it in the morning while he's drinking his coffee before he goes to work. And so
Yeah.
I hate mornings. I get up considerably later than every other person in this house. And so I'll kind of stumble out in the morning and he'll be like, well, this is what happened this morning. That judge, he's a jerk, and da 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 da. So
Yeah.
he gets the book in its fully finished form, not just in print, but on audio, and he
Right.
has a lot of fun kind of giving
He
me
must be
color
very proud of
commentary.
you.
Do
He
what?
must be super proud of you.
He is. It's very sweet.
So can you ever imagine yourself as a midwife?
You know, the funny thing is, I am one of 6 children, and my mother had all of us at home with midwives. And because
Really?
I'm the second oldest, I went with her to those appointments growing up. There was a time when I was younger that I thought I might want to be a midwife. I think it is the most incredible, fascinating job on earth. What these women can do to get children into the world is astonishing. I have nothing but respect for the profession.
Right.
And my particular personality makeup, I'm totally fine with blood and guts. Like I'd have been fine with the physical realities of it. The only thing I can't handle is vomit. So if somebody was throwing up, I'd be like, you got to deliver your own kid, lady. I'm out. Don't puke on the midwife.
Yeah. I thought that was very realistic, the scenes of her delivering
Yeah.
children. It was that
Yeah.
I felt like I was right there.
I have done it a few times. That helped. And then I've seen a number of others. I've never had a traumatic birth in the sense that she had to deliver a couple, and I've never witnessed a traumatic birth. I think that would not be fun in either case.
Yeah. So the author's note, I was talking to you about this before this broadcast. It's unusual and long and wonderful and gripping, and nobody should read it before they read the book, right?
Absolutely
So
not. Spoilers abound. Read
spoilers
the book
abound.
and then come back. I was telling you before we started, my goal with my author's notes, and I do this for all of my books. So there are other fun author's notes out there if you've not gotten to read them yet. I want it to be a secondary reading experience. I want to tell you this big story, right? I kind of want to take you by the jugular. I want my teeth right here around your throat. And we go on this journey together, and it's this story. And at the end, you're like, oh, okay, we're done. Whew, we made it. And then you catch your breath. And then I want to give you this second experience where we kind of peel back the layers.
Right.
Because I am writing, or have at least so far written about real people, I feel an obligation to explain what is fictional and what's not. I always have to make choices about, it's usually what not to include. Like in this case, here's an example. In this case, Rebecca Foster, who was the rape victim in this novel, in real life, there were actually 3 men involved. And I made a decision at the beginning to cut one of those men out of the story altogether. And then the second one, you learn from the first line of the book that he is dead. The first line in the book is the body floats downstream.
Right.
And you very quickly learn that that body is one of the men accused of raping her, which leaves one. which leads us to the trial. And so in that sense, it was a way to make a very untenable thing work on the page.
Right.
Because
So
these people really lived, I have an obligation to explain that. And a lot of that is what my author's notes are for.
so you must have had to do a lot of research into the legal system back in that time and what it would be like to go to trial.
As it was, yeah. I went into it, I think, in the way that a lot of people go into it, which is, oh, this is the legal system and this is how it works. And I very quickly realized our legal system in the 1700s was little to none. If you think
Right.
about it, the Constitution, we had the Constitution, the first 5 articles. The Bill of Rights was written but not ratified. The Supreme Court did not sit for the first time until it was either February or March. I think it was February of 1790. So just a couple months before this book ends. Everything you think you know about due process, you kind of have to take and throw away, because we had this baby country and a baby legal system, and they were lucky to have that at best. But that's where this trial takes place, in this legal system that we would not recognize today, to be honest with you. Like in Martha's day, women could not testify in court without their husbands or fathers present. It was called the law of coverage. I mean, there was literally a law that said that. That's insane. That should be insane to any of us. But that was the reality. And so I had to recreate that in such a way that you're reading it and it feels plausible. It feels like it could happen.
Yeah.
Not just that it did happen.
So any plans for this to be made into a film or TV series?
Oh, I wish. That would be so great. I've kind of been told it's a non-starter. I don't know whether it's the time period, but
really?
Yeah.
I would love it. I could see this being a series.
I would think that would be so much fun, but alas, I have not been put in charge of Hollywood.
So I just wanted to ask you, like, what book or books have you been reading in the last year that you really love? Is there something you would recommend the rest of us read?
So many. I'm always like, oh, how do I pick? Let me think of a couple that I really, really, really loved this last year. Okay, here's one. Fairy Tale by Stephen King. I love Stephen King. And if you've not read Fairy Tale, the best I can describe it is it's like a reverse Jack and the Beanstalk with a wink and a nod to every favorite fairy tale you've ever had. Let me think.
That's a big favorite. Yeah.
Yes, I just finished Leif Anger's new book, I Cheerfully Refuse.
Oh, I haven't read that.
Oh God, his first novel, Peace Like a River, is one of my top 10 all-time favorite novels of my life. Yes. Oh my God. And this new one is even better, which how? I don't know how he did it. But he was at I live in Nashville, and so he came to Parnassus last week on book tour, and I got to go and I got to meet him and be a complete fangirl.
Oh wow.
I'm trying to think. I read everything. I don't really love horror, like the gory horror or the monsters horror, which is funny because I love Stephen King, but I tend to love Stephen King's thrillers. Like Fairy Tale is an actual fairy tale. His novel Billy Summers is a thriller, and it is amazing. And then his novel 11/22/63 is also in my top 10 favorites of all time.
Oh wow. So I asked you before, so living in Tennessee, Nashville, are you friends with other authors? Do you guys, get together for girls' weekends or anything? Or?
Yes, it is one of the best parts of living in this particular city, is that most of my in real life friends are authors as well. I spend a huge amount of time with J.T. Ellison. Patty Callahan Henry doesn't live in Nashville. She just lives slightly south of here, but her as well. Lisa Patton, Paige Crutcher. There's so many authors in Nashville, and we have this really fun, really supportive community.
That's great. I always love when I interview authors such as yourself, and they're really close friends with other female authors. It's just so amazing to me.
Kind of has to be. Like, we always joke that this job, listen, it's the weirdest job on earth. It's the best job. It's the only job I've ever wanted. But we're kind of a weird bunch. We joke that it's, socially sanctioned anxiety. We have people that talk to us and stories running in our head all the time. And so when you have a weird job that exists within a weird industry, you kind of figure out really quickly that you need some like minds to help you get through.
So how did you get started? Did you always want to be a writer?
It's the only thing I've ever wanted to do. I knew from the time I was a little girl that this is what I wanted. My path toward publishing is a little bit different. I left home at 16, so really young,
Mhm.
was able to finish school really early. And then I worked and I traveled and I taught myself to do this. Unlike a lot of my peers who went to college and got MFAs and kind of took the more traditional route, I kind of feel like I snuck in the back door a little bit.
That's amazing. Did you get a lot of rejections at the very beginning?
Well, early, I did, when I was just figuring things out. And then I kind of took a break and I was like, okay, clearly you need to learn a few things. With my first novel, it's called The Wife, the Maid, and the Mistress. I actually landed the agent that I wanted most on the first try. And then she sold it
Wow.
very quickly. And so from that moment, I've kind of been off to the races. But there was sort of a pre-season in which I realized, okay, you need to work on this.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So we just have like 2 more minutes here. I just have to ask what everybody wants to know. What are you working on now? What's next?
Ooh, excellent
And
question.
maybe you can't say. I don't know.
Oh, no, I can. I'm deep in it. The next novel will tentatively be titled The Pirate Queen, and it
Okay.
is based on the life of a woman named Grace O'Malley, who was a pirate in the 1500s in Ireland. So I get to go back to medieval
You're
Ireland.
going back even further now.
I
Okay.
know I'll be in the Jurassic era if I'm not careful. But Grace was not just a pirate, she was a female chieftain in Ireland, one of the only ones to have existed. And she was a privateer. Her father taught her the art of piracy, and she was so good at it that she ended up becoming a thorn in the side of the British, to the point where she had to go have a face to face meeting with Queen Elizabeth I so that they could work out their differences. What's
Wow.
fascinating about Grace's story is that because she was a woman, the monks who wrote Irish history refused to include her. They were writing it as she lived, and they would not include her because they were so offended at this idea of a female chieftain, which means the only written record of her life from when she was actually alive is found in the English state papers, which
Oh.
effectively means that her life story was written by her enemies.
So how'd you find out about her?
Oh, how did I find?
Were
Oh,
you
again, a fluke thing. A friend of mine, an author friend of mine, challenged me to read a book of essays by thriller writers on why they write thrillers. It was
Yeah.
just sort of a read a different perspective. And I got to the end of the very first essay. I never made it past the first essay in the book because every author had to answer this set of questions. And one of them was the typical, if you could have dinner with 5 people or living or dead, who would it be? And she lists off 3 people that I don't remember. And then she says, and Queen Elizabeth I and her arch rival, Grace O'Malley, the Pirate Queen of Ireland. And I went, who is this pirate queen? I was reading that on my iPad at
Yeah.
night, and I ended up staying up. My husband is snoring over there in the bed next to me, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I have gone down the rabbit hole of Google to figure out who this Grace O'Malley was.
That's incredible. Okay. When can we expect to see that?
I believe, knock on wood, if all goes to plan, it will be November of 2025. So a
Fantastic.
little less than a year and a half.
Great.
Yeah.
So finally, I always ask, well, first of all, I want to know when you're not writing or reading, I mean, what do you like to do for fun?
Okay. Excellent question. I'm glad you asked. I realized several years ago that my last hobby became my job. Writing was always the thing that I did for fun. And
Right.
then it turned into my job, and I realized I don't have a hobby anymore. So, as silly as it sounds, I'm looking out the window at my garden. As silly as it sounds, I took up gardening. And
Ah,
I
very
love
good.
it so much. I grow vegetables, I grow herbs, I have flowers all around the house. And part of the reason that I love it is there is no scenario in which I'm going to try to turn that into my job.
Right.
I'm really,
You're not going to write a gardening book, are you?
well, no, I'm really stubborn and I'm really ambitious. So typically anything I take on, I have to be the best. But nobody wants to compete with gardening. Like
Right.
it doesn't matter. I can just go out there and for the pure joy of it, dig around in the dirt and make things grow. And it's so therapeutic and satisfying.
Oh, that's great. And finally, the girlfriend is all about female friendship
Oh
and
yeah.
the power of female friendship. So, do you go on girls' weekends? Do you like to what do you do with your girlfriends?
Oh, excellent question. Well, I also have three sisters, so I've
So
been
your best
chock full of
girlfriend.
girls and sisters my whole life. But yes, my friends and I will regularly, my writer friends and I will regularly take writing retreats, and we will decamp to a cabin somewhere for a weekend, and we'll all work on our projects. And then at night, we will sit around and have wine and talk about why these stories are trying to make us crazy. And then my friends that are not writers, we will do similar things, just not involving books.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ariel. The
Of
book
course.
and for this month is the Frozen River. I think most everybody's read it, but if you have it, please get a copy of it. Just a reminder that next month our book is The Women by Kristen Hanna, who will be joining us on May 21st. And then in June, our book is Go as a River by Shelley Reed, and she'll be joining us the third Tuesday of June at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. So thank you so much, Ariel. It's such a
Thank
joy to
you.
talk to you. Love this book so much. One of my all-time favorites. All you
Oh,
book
thank
club
you.
members, stay on the book club page because I'm going to be posting some conversation starters so that you can talk about what you loved about the book amongst yourselves. But thank you for your time. I so appreciate it. And I appreciate all the work and research that went into this book. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot to me. I really, really did give this book everything that I had. So I'm glad.
I could tell. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Of course.
Thanks so
You
much,
too. Have a good
Ariel.
night.
Bye, everybody.